What could make a loyal horse stand beside its freezing owner through a deadly blizzard while every passing car chose to drive away? On a lonely road outside Pine Creek, an elderly native woman was left in the snow with nowhere to go, while her white-gray horse refused to abandon her, even as the storm grew worse by the minute. Most people looked away. One cowboy almost did too, until the horse stepped into the road and forced him to stop. What began that night in the Wyoming snow would uncover buried secrets, stolen land, and a promise one dead man never got the chance to keep. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. Now let's begin the story. By the last week of April, Pine Creek, Wyoming had already started pretending winter was over. The old snow had retreated to the bottoms of fence posts, the shaded sides of ditches, and the dark places beneath the pines. Men in town had begun talking about seed-loose rails, spring cattle, and whether the road up toward Black Hollow Lake would be passable before the first week of May. Then just before evening, the northern mountains darkened as if a door had been shut against the sun. By the time Cole Mercer turned his old pickup toward Black Hollow Pass, the wind had already changed. It came down the valley hard and fast, carrying a cold that did not belong to spring. Snow swept across the road in white sheets, soft at first, then thicker until the world beyond the headlights became a blur of fence wire, black trees, and blowing ice. Cole kept both hands on the wheel. He was used to weather turning mean. A man who had spent most of his life around horses, cattle, broken gates, and lonely land learned not to argue with the sky. He was 52, broad-shouldered, worn down in the places work always found first. His hat sat low over his brow, his denim jacket was faded at the seams, and his hands were rough from a day spent repairing fence line and checking a neighbor's rented horses. Mercer Ranch waited beyond the pass alone near the old trail that climbed toward Black Hollow Lake. Cole had lived there long enough that solitude had stopped feeling like a condition and started feeling like a language. He did not look for company. He did not invite trouble. And when trouble appeared on a mountain road in the middle of a storm, his first instinct was to keep driving. He saw the tracks before he saw the figure. Several vehicles had passed through ahead of him. Their tire marks cut dark grooves through the fresh snow, slowed near the shoulder, then straightened again and continued on. Cole noticed that without thinking much of it. People slowed for deer-stalled engines, drunks, wrecks, and anything else that might become somebody else's problem. Then the storm thinned for half a second. A shape sat near the mile marker on the right side of the road. Cole eased off the gas. At first, he thought it might be a torn sack blown from a truck bed, or maybe a person who had stumbled out drunk and gone down in the snow. Then his headlights caught the curve of a shoulder, the fall of dark hair streaked with silver, and two hands pulled tight against a thin coat. A woman. Beside her stood a horse. Cole's foot hovered over the brake. The horse was white-gray, almost ghostly in the storm, its mane and back covered in snow. It stood turned slightly sideways, using its own body to shield the woman from the worst of the wind. It did not rear, did not run, did not scream into the blizzard. It simply stood there solid and silent, like a living wall between her and the storm. Cole slowed almost to a crawl. The woman did not lift her head. The horse did. Its dark eyes caught the headlights and held them. Cole swallowed once. "Damn it," he muttered. He told himself someone else had surely called the sheriff. He told himself there were reasons not to stop in weather like this. A man alone on an empty pass did not walk blind into a scene he did not understand. People got desperate. People set traps. People made their ruin contagious. So he rolled past. 10 yards, 15. Then he looked in the rearview mirror. The horse had turned its head to watch him leave. It did not look frightened. It did not look confused. It looked straight through the snow at his red taillights, with a stillness Cole could not shake. He drove another few yards. Then the horse stepped into the road. Cole slammed the brakes. The truck slid sideways for a breath, tires hissing over packed snow before catching hard. The white-gray horse stood directly in front of the headlights, snow blowing across its chest, its head low, its body unmoving. Cole stared through the windshield. "Well," he said under his breath, "I guess you've made your point." He killed the engine, shoved open the door, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit him like a hand across the face. Snow flew under the brim of his hat and stung his eyes. He pulled his collar higher and started toward the woman. The horse moved at once. It crossed between them, lowering its head just enough to make the warning plain. It did not charge, but Cole knew horses well enough to understand danger when it stood 15 feet away and weighed half a ton. The animal's front legs planted hard. Its ears flicked back. Its breath came white and sharp in the beam of the headlights. "Easy," Cole said, stopping where he was. "I'm not here to hurt her." The horse did not move. Cole slowly took off one glove and held his bare hand down at his side. He did not reach for the animal's face. He did not stare into its eyes too long. Instead, he turned slightly, making himself smaller, less direct. "You know," he said quietly, "standing here arguing with me won't help her much." The woman stirred. Her head lifted with effort. Snow clung to her lashes. Her face was narrow-lined and gray with cold, but her eyes were awake enough to understand. She raised one trembling hand and touched the horse's neck. "It's all right, Ghost," she whispered. Her voice was thin enough to almost vanish in the wind. "He's not the enemy." The horse held its ground another second. Then it stepped aside. Cole moved quickly after that. He knelt beside the woman and felt the cold coming off her like she had been carved from it. Her lips were blue. Her hands were stiff. The coat she wore was nowhere near enough for the storm. "Ma'am," he said, "can you stand?" She tried to answer, but her body gave the truth before her pride could. Cole slid one arm behind her back and the other beneath her knees. "I've got you." She made a weak sound. "Ghost." "He's coming." Cole carried her to the truck and settled her into the passenger seat. He cranked the engine, turned the heater as high as it would go, and pulled a spare canvas coat from behind the seat to wrap around her. The horse followed so close, its shoulder nearly brushed the door. Cole tried to catch the trailing lead rope and guide it toward the back. Ghost refused. The horse jerked its head away and stepped beside the truck, staying near the woman's door. "Fine," Cole said, too cold and too tired to argue with a creature that had already won once that night. "Walk, then." He drove slowly. The truck crawled through the pass headlights, pushing through the blizzard, while Ghost followed in the red glow of the taillights. Cole kept glancing in the mirror, half expecting the horse to fall back, but it never did. It walked through the storm as if the road existed for one reason, only to get Elena Redhawk somewhere safe. He did not know her name yet, but he would soon. Mercer Ranch appeared through the snow, like a place that had almost given up being found. A low wooden house, a small barn, fences half buried white, a windmill that creaked in the dark. Cole parked as close to the porch as he could and carried the woman inside. The house smelled of old pine wood smoke, coffee, and leather. Cole laid her near the stove-fed split wood into the fire and set water to warm. He moved with the rough competence of a man who had spent years fixing emergencies because no one else was close enough to help. The woman drifted in and out of awareness. "Ghost," she murmured. "He's outside." Her eyes opened a little. "Don't shut him away." Cole looked toward the window. Through the snow-streaked glass, he could see the horse standing near the porch head, angled toward the house. "I tried," he said. He didn't take to the idea. He brought hay and warm water to the porch. Ghost ate only a mouthful, drank a little, and returned to his place near the window. Cole watched him for a moment, struck by the strange dignity of the animal. Not wild, not broken, just loyal past the point of sense. Inside, the woman slowly warmed. Cole gave her dry blankets and hot tea with more sugar than taste required. She held the cup in both hands, though her fingers shook. "Name's Cole Mercer," he said. She looked at him across the rim of the cup. Elena Redhawk. That name tightened something in him. "Redhawk," he repeated. She noticed. "You know it. I know the land. Black Hollow Lake." Folks used to say the Redhawk family had been there longer than Pine Creek had a name. Her face changed, not with pride exactly, but with an old sorrow that had learned to stand upright. Some things remain true, even after people stop saying them. Cole did not answer. That night, neither he nor the horse slept much. Elena rested in the room near the stove, wrapped in blankets. Ghost stood outside the window, snow gathered along his back ears, shifting at every sound. Cole sat in a chair near the kitchen table, boots still on coffee cooling beside him. He had lived alone a long time. Long enough that another person's breathing in the house felt almost louder than the storm. Who really left that old native woman to die in the blizzard? And why did Ghost trust Cole when every other car drove away? Maybe the horse saw something in him long before anyone else did. Tell us what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe before we step into the most powerful part of the story. Morning came pale and hard. The blizzard had weakened, but the ranch lay buried under fresh snow. Elena woke with more color in her face and pain deeper in her eyes. She sat at Cole's small table wrapped in one of his old wool blankets, while Ghost stood just beyond the kitchen window. "You were thrown out," Cole said, not as a question. Elena's mouth tightened. "I was told I should leave for a few days. That doesn't sound the same." "No," she said softly. "It does not." She told him then about her son Daniel Redhawk. 3 weeks dead. His truck had gone off the road near Black Hollow Pass during a snowstorm. The report said he had been drinking. The report said he lost control. The report said many things in the clean language of people who wanted the dead to remain convenient. Cole listened without interrupting. "Elena," he said finally, "did you believe it?" She looked down at her hands. A mother can doubt quietly. That does not mean anyone listens. The name Daniel Redhawk stirred something in Cole's memory, but he could not place it. Elena mentioned he had served overseas, and Cole looked toward the window, toward the horse standing in the morning cold, and felt the past move somewhere behind his ribs. Before they left for Daniel's house, Ghost began acting strangely. The old white-gray horse stood beneath the porch roof, pawing hard at a worn saddle Elena had brought with her. It had been tied to the side rail the night before, half frozen and crusted with snow. Ghost pushed his muzzle into the leather, then pawed again harder. "That was Daniel's," Elena said. Cole took the saddle down and turned it over. At first he saw nothing but age sweat stains and careful repairs. Then his thumb found a seam that had been stitched too recently. He pulled a knife from his belt and opened it. Inside was a narrow, hidden pocket. Cole removed 3 things: a storage key, a garage receipt for brake work on Daniel's truck, and a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was sharp, hurried. "Don't let them take Black Hollow." Elena made a sound that was not quite a sob. "That is Daniel's hand." Cole stared at the note. The room seemed colder than before. A dead man did not hide a warning in a saddle unless he expected someone to come looking after him. By midday, Cole drove Elena back into Pine Creek. Ghost came with them despite Cole's better judgment. Daniel's house sat in the cleaner, wealthier part of town, where the snow had already been shoveled from the walks, and every window looked polished enough to deny grief. Claire Whitmore opened the door. She was beautiful in a careful way, dressed in black, her hair smooth, her eyes damp but oddly cool. She looked at Elena first, then Cole, then the horse, tied near the porch rail. "Elena," she said, "I was worried." Elena's face remained still. "I came for my things." "Of course." Claire stepped aside. "You should have called." Inside the house was too neat. Fresh flowers stood on the table. Papers lay arranged in careful stacks. It felt less like a home in mourning than a room prepared for signatures. Cole saw the man before he spoke. Victor Hale emerged from Daniel's office, wearing a dark coat, polished boots, and the calm expression of someone who had never entered a room without first deciding he belonged there. "Mrs. Redhawk," he said warmly, "I'm glad you're safe." Elena did not answer. Victor turned to Cole. "And you are driving, help," Cole said. Victor smiled as if filing him away. Claire lifted a folder from the table. "Elena, there are some temporary papers we need to discuss. Nothing final. Just authority to manage certain property matters while everything is so unsettled." Cole looked at the heading. Black Hollow Lake Parcel. Elena did not touch the pen. Victor's voice softened. "Land can become a burden at a certain age. Taxes, maintenance, legal pressure. Claire is only trying to protect you from hardship." Cole heard the threat inside the kindness. Then Victor stepped closer and placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. Outside, Ghost exploded. The horse screamed, slammed its hooves against the porch boards, and jerked so hard at the rail that the wood cracked. Claire flinched. Victor's face changed for one bare instant before he covered it. Fear, not surprise, recognition. Cole saw it. Ghost stood outside the window, eyes fixed on Victor Hale, as if the animal had dragged some terrible memory out of the snow and brought it back alive. Cole picked up Elena's small bag. "We're done here," he said. No one stopped them. But as Cole drove away from Daniel Redhawk's house, the brake receipt sat heavy in his coat pocket, and the warning from the saddle burned in his mind. Cole Mercer did not turn the truck back toward Mercer Ranch after leaving Daniel Redhawk's house. Snow drifted across the roads in thin silver lines beneath the gray Wyoming sky, while Elena sat silently beside him, one hand resting weakly in her lap. Ghost followed behind the truck again, the white-gray horse moving steadily through the cold, as though it understood the road mattered now more than shelter. Cole kept thinking about the brake receipt hidden inside the saddle, and about Victor Hale's face when Ghost reacted to him. The garage stood at the edge of Pine Creek, near an old gas station whose sign no longer lit properly at night. Hank Morrison's place looked like it had survived 3 decades entirely out of stubbornness. Rusted rims leaned against the walls. Chains hung from hooks, blackened with grease. The smell of old oil coffee welding smoke and cold iron rolled out the moment Cole opened the door. Hank Morrison looked up from beneath the hood of a pickup truck. He was broad, gray-bearded, and rough around the edges, in the way old mechanics often were. A cigarette burned forgotten beside a wrench tray, while country radio crackled softly in the corner. "Well," Hank muttered, wiping his hands on a rag. "Either you came for repairs or trouble." Cole placed the folded brake receipt on the counter. Hank looked down. The change in his face happened instantly. That truck, he said quietly, belonged to Daniel Redhawk. Elena stiffened beside Cole. Hank looked toward her, then toward the storm-dark window, where Ghost stood tied outside, stamping one hoof restlessly against the frozen ground. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence told Cole more than words could. "You knew something wasn't right?" Cole said. Hank leaned back against the workbench and exhaled slowly. Ever since the boy died. He glanced again at the receipt. Daniel brought the truck in 4 days before the wreck. Said the brakes felt wrong. Soft 1 minute, grabbing the next. Said going downhill near Black Hollow Pass felt like rolling dice. Did you fix them? Cole asked. No time. Hank shook his head. I'd only started checking the lines and master cylinder. Told him to leave it overnight. He said he had business up near the ridge and would come back after. But he never did, Elena whispered. Hank's jaw tightened. No. Claire Whitmore came instead. Cole exchanged a look with Elena. She picked up the truck herself, yeah. Hank rubbed grease from his thumb with the rag, though it clearly no longer mattered. I told her straight that vehicle wasn't safe to drive yet. Told her Daniel needed to wait. What did she say? That Daniel needed the truck immediately. Said he already knew the risk. Hank's expression darkened. Thing is, I didn't believe her. Outside, Ghost jerked the lead rope once and struck the frozen dirt again. Cole leaned closer. Was Daniel drunk when he brought it in? Hank barked a humorless laugh. Not even close. Tired, sure. Stressed, definitely. But drunk men don't sit in my office drawing diagrams on napkins trying to explain brake pressure. Diagrams. Hank nodded slowly. Daniel thought somebody might have tampered with the truck. Elena closed her eyes briefly. Hank lowered his voice. He also kept asking about vehicles around Black Hollow Lake. Trucks that didn't belong there. Cole folded his arms. What kind of vehicles? Black SUVs mostly. Expensive ones. Out-of-state plates sometimes. Sometimes no local tags at all. Hank pointed vaguely toward the North Hills. Daniel said they kept showing up at night near the old Red Hawk land. Elena looked up sharply. He thought they were scouting routes before some development project got announced. Hank paused. One night, I saw one of those suits stop here, asking directions toward Black Hollow Ridge. Men dressed too clean for Pine Creek. Cole already knew the answer before asking. Victor Hale could have been one of his people. Hank shrugged. Daniel started writing down plates and dates after that. Ghost suddenly gave a sharp, restless snort outside the garage. Cole reached into his jacket and removed the storage key from Daniel's saddle. Hank studied it only a second before recognition crossed his face. That belongs to the old storage units near the abandoned rail station? Elena frowned. Daniel never mentioned any storage unit. That probably means he didn't want you involved, Cole said quietly. Pain moved across Elena's face at that. The realization that her son had hidden things from her, not out of distrust, but protection. Cole closed his fist around the key. Then we go now. Before Victor figures out, Daniel left something behind. Ghost whinnied sharply outside, as if agreeing. The storage facility sat behind the abandoned train depot, where rusted tracks disappeared toward Black Hollow like scars through the snow. Wind rattled loose sheet metal somewhere nearby. The entire place felt forgotten by time. Cole unlocked Unit C-17. The metal door groaned upward. Inside was not the clutter of ordinary storage. No family furniture, no seasonal boxes. Everything was arranged with deliberate care. A folding table, file boxes, rolled maps, an old laptop sealed in plastic, audio tapes, handwritten notes stacked with military precision. Elena stepped slowly inside. Daniel prepared this, she whispered. Cole nodded, like he expected somebody else might have to finish it. Ghost refused to enter. The horse remained near the doorway, ears shifting constantly toward the road beyond the rail yard. Cole began sorting through the material. The first box contained maps of Black Hollow Lake and surrounding properties. Many parcels belonged to native families or elderly landowners who had lived there for generations. Several were marked with red circles and arrows. Red Hawk Ridge sat directly in the center of a projected road extension. Cole spread another blueprint beside it. Black Hollow Resort, luxury cabins, private marina, lakefront development. He looked toward Elena. Victor already had the project mapped before anyone in town knew it existed. The second box held purchase letters, polite language, financial assistance, tax relief, retirement security. But when stacked together, the pattern became obvious. Pressure disguised as kindness. Some owners had sold property for fractions of actual value. Others had signed authority transfers shortly before quietly leaving Pine Creek altogether. Elena recognized names from around the lake. Evelyn Crowley, Joseph Tall Pine. Her voice weakened. People thought they simply moved away. Cole opened another folder. Inside were debt records under Claire Whitmore's name. Large debts, much larger than Daniel and Claire could reasonably carry. Several loans connected indirectly to Victor Hale's holding companies. Bank warnings, debt collection notices, missed payments. Across one page, Daniel had scribbled a note in black ink. This isn't debt. It's a leash. Elena sat heavily in the folding chair. Daniel tried to save her. Looks that way, Cole admitted. He hated Victor Hale more with every page. Not because the man bought land, because he bought desperation. Another envelope contained photographs. Victor Hale meeting privately with members of the town council behind restaurants outside banks near the planning office. One photo showed Victor handing a thick envelope to a councilman near Black Hollow Road. Claire appeared in several shots too, standing tense beside vehicles or watching meetings from a distance. She knew, Elena whispered. Or she got trapped inside it, Cole replied. Then Cole found the recorder. It was wrapped carefully inside an old cloth. On the tape, Daniel had written, "If something happens at Black Hollow." Elena looked frightened. I don't know if I can hear this. Cole held the recorder a moment before pressing play. Static crackled. Then Daniel's voice emerged, rough and tired. If this recording gets found, he said, then either I ran out of time, or Victor Hale finally decided I'd become a problem. Elena covered her mouth instantly. Daniel explained everything in fragments. Victor's shell companies, the pressure campaign against landowners, Claire's debts, the fear growing around Black Hollow. He wants Lakota land for the resort, Daniel said through the hiss of tape. Not just the lakefront, the sacred ridge too. Red Hawk Ridge isn't property, it's memory. The recorder crackled again. I think I'm being watched now. Somebody's been following my truck. Somebody searched the house while we were gone. Cole's stomach tightened. Then Daniel said his name. If something happens to me, find Cole Mercer. Cole froze. Cole pulled me out of a firefight in Afghanistan once, Daniel continued. But the truth is, he thinks I saved him. Maybe we both did. Memory hit Cole like a fist. Smoke, burning metal. Daniel dragging him from a wrecked vehicle while rounds cracked overhead. Cole had spent years burying that part of himself beneath isolation and silence. And Daniel had tried to find him before dying. I couldn't reach you, Daniel said quietly on the tape. But if you hear this now, help my mother. The recording ended. Elena cried silently beside the table's shoulders, trembling. Cole stared at the floor for a long moment. Guilt spread through him, cold and heavy. Daniel had searched for him while Cole hid from the world like a ghost inside his own ranch. From that moment forward, helping Elena stopped being an act of kindness. it became a debt. That night they returned to Mercer Ranch, carrying every file and tape they could fit into the truck. Snow had started again by midnight. Cole locked Ghost inside the barn for once, hoping the horse would finally rest. At nearly 1 a.m, a crash shattered the silence. Cole grabbed the shotgun beside the bed and ran outside. Ghost had broken the stall latch. The horse stood in the blowing snow, screaming toward the northern hills. Elena appeared at the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. He only acts like this when something reminds him of Daniel. Before Cole could stop him, Ghost bolted into the darkness toward Black Hollow Lake. "Damn horse," Cole muttered. He grabbed Heavy Coat's flashlights and the truck keys. They followed the tracks deep into an older mountain road, half buried by snowdrifts. Pines crowded both sides of the trail until Ghost finally stopped before a dark cabin hidden among the trees near the lake. Elena stared. This was our old family cabin. A new lock hung on the door. Cole tried one of the keys from Daniel's storage box. It opened immediately. Inside, the cabin smelled cold, but lived in. Fresh ash rested inside the fireplace. Maps covered one wall. A laptop sat sealed inside a waterproof case beside hard drives and notebooks. Daniel had used the place recently. Ghost remained outside, staring toward the slope leading down to the ravine where Daniel died. Cole powered up the laptop using spare batteries. Folders filled the screen. One was dated the night of Daniel's death. Cole opened the footage. A trail camera showed the snowy mountain road near Black Hollow Pass. Daniel's red truck appeared first. Several minutes later, a black SUV followed at a distance. Elena leaned closer. The image blurred through snowfall, but the shape looked unmistakably like Victor Hale's vehicle. Then, near the curve, the SUV's headlights switched off. The footage never captured the crash itself, but it proved Daniel had not been alone. Another folder showed the same SUV appearing repeatedly near Red Hawk Ridge over several previous nights. Cole copied every file onto a backup drive. Outside, Ghost suddenly screamed. Headlights moved faintly through the trees in the distance. Cole snapped the laptop shut. Someone's out there. They grabbed the evidence and left immediately. By morning, they sat across from Sheriff Rachel Boone inside the Pine Creek Sheriff's office. Rachel listened carefully while Cole laid out the brake receipt, the photographs, the recording, and the footage. But her expression remained cautious. The original investigation concluded accidental death, she said. Ice on the road, vehicle in the ravine, alcohol level high enough to support impaired driving. That report was convenient, Cole replied sharply. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Convenient isn't proof. No, Elena said quietly. But neither is laziness. Rachel looked at her. Elena folded trembling hands together. Are you going to look carefully now? Or bury my son twice? That landed harder than any accusation. Rachel leaned back slowly. There have been other things around Black Hollow that bothered me. Elderly owners selling land suddenly. People leaving town under pressure. Transactions technically legal, but... She hesitated. Wrong. Cole placed Daniel's maps in front of her. Rachel studied them carefully. These connect everything she admitted. She agreed to review the accident reports, gas station footage, Victor's vehicle records, and the land transfers. Not officially reopening the case. Not yet. But for the first time, Daniel Redhawk had someone inside the law willing to reconsider the truth. That evening, Elena found another letter hidden among Daniel's belongings. Unsent. In it, Daniel wrote that he once wanted to leave Pine Creek with Claire entirely. He was exhausted by the threats, the debts, and Victor Hale's pressure. But Claire had convinced him to stay and fight. If we leave, Daniel had written, She told him Red Hawk Ridge dies forever. Elena lowered the letter slowly. Then, why is she helping Victor now? Cole stared into the fire. Maybe fear changes people. Or maybe Victor found something worse than fear. Near sunset, they drove to the crash site. The curve above Black Hollow Pass looked even more dangerous in daylight. One side rose into dark rock. The other dropped sharply into the ravine below. Ghost became increasingly nervous as they approached. His ears pinned back. His breathing quickened. When they reached the broken guardrail, the horse suddenly jerked backward and screamed. Cole examined the damaged wood carefully. Then he saw it. Black paint. Faint, but unmistakable. Not from Daniel's red truck. He crouched lower. A second impact mark sat lower along the railing, angled sideways. Not a straight crash. A shove. Rachel arrived 30 minutes later and inspected the damage herself. This wasn't in the report, she said quietly. She looked down toward the ravine where Daniel had died. Then she spoke the words none of them would ever forget. This doesn't look like an accident anymore. Snow drifted across the road again as evening darkened the mountains. Somewhere beyond Pine Creek, Victor Hale was preparing to publicly announce Black Hollow Resort to the entire town. And now, Cole, Elena, Rachel, and Ghost, the last living witness, who had never stopped protecting Daniel, were preparing to walk straight into the middle of it. By noon the next day, the center of Pine Creek looked less like a struggling Wyoming town and more like the set of a campaign rally. A large stage had been raised in front of the town hall beneath strings of white lights and bright banners fluttering in the cold mountain wind. Architectural renderings stood mounted across polished display boards. Glass front lodges beside Black Hollow Lake lakeside restaurants, luxury cabins glowing gold against painted sunsets. Across the center banner, bold letters stretched over the crowd. Black Hollow Resort, a new future for Pine Creek. People gathered from every corner of town despite the lingering cold. Ranchers stood beside shop owners. Elderly couples wrapped in winter coats listened beside young families carrying coffee cups and children on their shoulders. Reporters from the local paper adjusted cameras while members of the town council mingled near the stage with polished smiles. Victor Hale had designed the event carefully. This was not supposed to look like a land deal. It was supposed to look like hope. Cole Mercer stood near the back of the crowd beside Elena Redhawk and Ghost. Snowmelt dripped from the awnings overhead while cold wind swept through the square. Ghost shifted uneasily beside Elena, ears pinned back, as if the horse already sensed something rotten beneath the speeches and polished signs. Cole looked at the giant resort renderings and felt his jaw tighten. Daniel had died trying to stop this. And now Victor intended to turn the whole town into witnesses for his lie. A murmur spread through the crowd as Claire Whitmore appeared near the stage. She wore a long black coat over a dark, elegant dress, her blonde hair tied neatly behind her neck. Her face looked pale and exhausted, but composed with almost unnatural precision. Beside her stood a smaller display board. Daniel Red Hawk Memorial Fund. Underneath it, smaller lettering explained the foundation would support veterans, preserve local heritage, and promote sustainable development around Black Hollow. Cole nearly laughed at the cruelty of it. Victor had wrapped theft in charity. People in the crowd looked at Claire with sympathy. Many of them believed she was a grieving widow trying to continue her husband's unfinished dream. A few even nodded respectfully toward the memorial sign. Elena stood completely still. Her son's name sat beside resort blueprints and investment promises like decoration for a business deal. Ghost suddenly stomped hard against the pavement. Several people nearby startled at the sharp crack of the hoof. Claire noticed Elena in the crowd. For only a fraction of a second, the perfect control slipped from her face. fear. Victor saw them too. His eyes locked briefly onto the folder under Cole's arm. And in that instant, Cole saw it. Victor knew. He knew they had found Daniel's evidence. Victor recovered quickly and stepped toward the microphone with the smooth confidence of a man used to owning rooms. "Friends," he began warmly, "Pine Creek has spent too many years surviving on memories." The crowd quieted. Victor gestured toward the mountains beyond town. Old ranches, empty roads, businesses closing one by one, young people leaving because there's nothing left for them here. He paused at exactly the right moment. But that changes now. Applause rose from several sections of the square. Victor smiled modestly, as if reluctant to accept praise. Black Hollow Resort will bring jobs, tourism, better infrastructure, and new opportunity. This town deserves a future. More applause. Cole watched people nodding. Victor continued carefully wrapping greed in the language of salvation. "We can honor our history without becoming trapped by it." Then came the line Cole knew was coming. Daniel Red Hawk understood that better than anyone. Elena's fingers tightened against Ghost's reins. Victor lowered his head solemnly. Daniel believed Black Hollow should become a place accessible to everyone. A place that could unite the town instead of dividing it. Some people clapped harder at that. An older rancher beside the stage even muttered, maybe the boy was right. Cole felt anger move through him like fire. Victor wasn't simply lying. He was stealing Daniel's voice. Sheriff Rachel Boone stood near the far side of the crowd beside two deputies' arms, folded tightly across her jacket. She watched everything carefully, without interrupting. Not yet. Victor reached for a document folder on the podium. "We are now prepared to begin signing the preliminary support agreements, not today." The voice cut across the square sharply. Victor froze. Cole stepped forward through the crowd. Ghost let out a loud, piercing whinny that echoed between the buildings, causing several people to turn instantly. Cole climbed onto the stage without permission. One deputy started toward him, but Rachel lifted a hand slightly. "Wait." Victor forced a strained smile. "Mr. Mercer, this isn't the time." Cole ignored him and took the microphone. "My name is Cole Mercer," he said evenly. "I'm not here to fight progress. I'm not here to shut down this town." The crowd listened carefully now. "I'm here because a dead man is being used to say things he never said." Victor's smile disappeared completely. Claire's face drained of color as Cole placed the old tape recorder onto the podium. The atmosphere changed instantly. The cheerful announcement no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like a trial. Victor stepped closer. "You need to leave this stage." Cole looked directly at him. "No." For several long seconds, only the wind moved through the square. Then Cole spoke again. "Years ago in Afghanistan, I got trapped inside a burning vehicle after an ambush." The crowd fell silent. Most men would have stayed down. Daniel Red Hawk didn't. Cole's voice remained steady, but the memory lived sharply behind his eyes. "He ran back through gunfire and pulled me out while the truck was burning around us." Elena lowered her head quietly. Cole continued. "Daniel saved my life, knowing he could die doing it." The square had become completely still now. After the war, I disappeared from everybody. Stopped answering calls, stopped being part of the world. His jaw tightened. I didn't know Daniel came back to Pine Creek. I didn't know he was in trouble. Victor shifted uncomfortably near the podium. "But I know this," Cole said firmly. Daniel Red Hawk was not some drunk fool who drove himself off a mountain road. Murmurs spread through the crowd. He was the kind of man who ran toward danger when everybody else ran away. Cole looked across the square. And I think he died doing exactly that here in Pine Creek. The applause for Victor had vanished entirely. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. For the first time since Daniel's death, his name was being spoken with honor instead of shame. Cole turned and pointed toward the massive resort rendering behind the stage. Victor Hale doesn't care about Daniel Red Hawk. Victor's expression hardened immediately. He's using Daniel's death to make all of you believe the Red Hawk family supported this project. Cole opened the evidence folder. We found purchase letters sent to elderly landowners around Black Hollow, shell companies tied to Victor Hale, private planning maps created before this resort was ever publicly announced. Town council members near the stage began exchanging nervous looks. We found debt records connected to Claire Whitmore, secret meetings with council members, surveillance photographs, evidence of intimidation. Victor laughed sharply, though the sound came too quickly. This is ridiculous. You're a bitter cowboy who doesn't understand economics. Cole stared at him coldly. No, he replied. I understand the difference between building something and stealing it. Several people in the crowd nodded slowly. One council member quietly stepped farther away from Victor. Claire looked trapped between panic and collapse. Then Cole picked up the recorder. You want to know what Daniel actually believed? He pressed play. Static hissed loudly through the speakers. The crowd leaned closer. Then Daniel's exhausted voice filled the square. If this recording gets found... Then Victor Hale finally decided I became a problem. Shock moved visibly across the audience. Daniel continued speaking about land manipulation, pressure campaigns, shell corporations, and families being forced to sell property through fear and debt. He described native families and elderly residents trapped beneath legal threats and financial pressure. Red Hawk Ridge isn't land, Daniel's voice said through static. It's sacred ground. It's history. Claire closed her eyes tightly as Daniel continued. Victor's using Claire's debt like a leash. The crowd turned toward her instantly. Daniel's voice cracked slightly near the end. I don't know who I can trust anymore. But I need my mother protected. Elena covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Then came the final line. Don't let them take Black Hollow. Silence swallowed the square. Even Ghost stood completely still. It was almost as if the horse recognized Daniel's voice too. Victor's event collapsed right there in front of the entire town. Nobody applauded. Nobody smiled. An elderly man suddenly shouted from the crowd, that company name they sent papers to my ranch last winter. Another woman raised her voice. My father got the same kind of letters. The noise spread quickly. Questions, accusations, fear. Town council members started denying involvement over each other. Victor stepped back toward the microphone. This recording is fabricated. Careful with that statement, Rachel Boone said sharply. The sheriff stepped forward through the crowd beside her deputies. We are currently verifying all evidence connected to Daniel Red Hawk's death. The square erupted again. Rachel's words changed everything. This was no longer rumor. This was criminal investigation. And for the first time since arriving in Pine Creek, Victor Hale looked afraid. Then Claire suddenly moved. She walked toward the microphone, slowly, almost stumbling. Victor hissed under his breath, Claire, don't. She ignored him. When she faced the crowd again, the perfect widow mask had finally shattered. Tears streaked her face. My family was drowning in debt, she said weakly. Medical bills, failed investments, everything collapsed. The crowd listened in complete silence. Victor Hale offered to erase the debt if I convinced Daniel to sell Red Hawk Ridge. Victor stepped toward her furiously. Enough. Claire flinched, but kept talking. At first, I listened to him because I was scared. Her breathing shook. But Daniel discovered other accidents connected to people who refused to sell land around Black Hollow. Murmurs spread again. Some changed their minds and suddenly got threatened. Others disappeared from town entirely. Victor's calm finally broke. She's unstable. Claire turned toward him with tears in her eyes. You told me nobody would believe Daniel anyway. Victor lunged toward the microphone, but deputies moved closer immediately. Claire looked toward Cole. The night Daniel died? He called you. Cole froze. Claire nodded weakly. He told me the truck brakes were failing. He said somebody was following him through the pass. Cole felt the blood drain from his face. He tried calling you before he went up the mountain. The world around him seemed to narrow suddenly. For years, Cole had buried himself so deeply in isolation that he stopped answering unfamiliar calls, stopped letting anybody from the past reach him. And Daniel had called during the worst night of his life. Cole hadn't been there. Elena stepped quietly beside him. She saw the guilt tearing through him immediately, but she shook her head softly. Daniel didn't call you to give you guilt, she whispered. He called because he believed you would come back when it mattered. Those words steadied him enough to remain standing. Across the square, Victor Hale realized the crowd was no longer his. Rachel signaled subtly toward her deputies. Victor saw it too. Without warning, he turned and moved quickly down the far side of the stage. Victor, Rachel shouted. The businessman forced himself to walk calmly at first. Then one deputy moved toward him. Victor broke into a sprint. People screamed and scattered as he rushed toward the black SUV parked near the curb. He threw open the door, started the engine, and slammed the vehicle into motion. Rachel yelled, "Stop the vehicle now!" Cole jumped off the stage and ran, but he was too far away. The SUV accelerated toward the edge of the square, and Ghost exploded forward. The white-gray horse ripped free from the reins and charged directly into the road. People shouted in panic. Ghost planted himself squarely in front of the speeding SUV. Victor swerved violently. The tires lost traction on melting snow and cold mud. The SUV slammed sideways into a wooden utility pole with a brutal crack. Glass shattered. Airbags exploded. The entire square went dead silent. Ghost backed away, breathing hard, but still standing. Cole reached him first, grabbing the reins and checking frantically for injuries. The horse nudged Elena's shoulder the moment she approached. Once again, Ghost had refused to abandon her. And once again, he had stopped the man responsible for Daniel's death from escaping. Rachel and the deputies dragged Victor from the wrecked SUV. He shouted wildly now, all composure gone. "This is a setup, you can't prove any of this." Rachel snapped handcuffs around his wrists. "I can prove enough to arrest you." She read the charges clearly in front of the entire town. Land fraud, coercion of property transactions, bribery of local officials, obstruction related to the death investigation of Daniel Red Hawk. Several council members were detained immediately for questioning. Claire was escorted away separately as a cooperating witness. Victor Hale stood handcuffed beside the shattered Black Hollow Resort display, while reporters photographed the moment from every angle. The symbol of his empire had become the image of its collapse. Then the crowd slowly turned toward Elena. She climbed the stage quietly with Ghost beside her. No shouting, no triumph, no tears. She looked across the faces of the same people who had watched her freeze beside a road only days earlier. "Black Hollow is not an investment," she said softly. The square became completely silent again. It is not a drawing on paper. It is not a resort. Wind moved through the hanging banners overhead. It is memory, blood, prayer, the names of people who lived there long before any of us. Elena looked directly at the crowd. Black Hollow does not belong to people who buy land with blood. Nobody applauded immediately, because it did not feel like victory. It felt like judgment. By sunset, Sheriff Boone officially suspended all previous conclusions regarding Daniel Redhawk's death. The accident investigation became a criminal case. The local newspaper began interviewing residents who had been pressured into selling land. The Daniel Redhawk Memorial Fund was frozen pending investigation. Black Hollow Resort was halted indefinitely. And slowly, painfully, Pine Creek began understanding the truth. Daniel Redhawk had not died drunk beside a mountain road. He died trying to protect his mother, his land, and an entire town built on lies too large for anyone to admit. As the crowd slowly dispersed beneath the darkening Wyoming sky, Cole stood beside Elena and Ghost in the center of the ruined square. He realized then that his debt to Daniel was not finished. It had only become something larger, a responsibility that now belonged to all of them. The days following Victor Hale's arrest settled over Pine Creek, like the silence that comes after an avalanche, heavy, unnatural, and impossible to ignore. People no longer spoke about Black Hollow Resort with excitement. The bright banners disappeared from the town square within 2 days. The giant renderings of luxury cabins and lakeside hotels vanished from storefront windows almost overnight. Conversations that once revolved around tourism and investment slowly turned into whispers about land contracts, threatening phone calls, and elderly ranchers who had left town far too suddenly. At the diner, old men began admitting they had received strange purchase offers years earlier. At church, widows quietly unfolded letters they had hidden inside kitchen drawers because they were too ashamed to show anyone. In Hank Morrison's garage, men who once defended Victor Hale now stared silently at the oil-stained floor while admitting they had ignored too many warning signs. And everywhere, people spoke Daniel Redhawk's name differently now. Not with suspicion, with respect. Sheriff Rachel Boone expanded the investigation across the entire Black Hollow region. Several town council members were suspended while state investigators reviewed years of land transactions connected to Victor's companies. But Elena Redhawk never returned to Daniel's old house. That place no longer felt like home. Too many lies had lived inside its walls. Too many papers had replaced memories. So when Cole Mercer drove her back to Mercer Ranch beneath a cold Wyoming sunset, Elena simply sat quietly beside the truck window, while Ghost followed behind through the drifting evening dust. The same storm that had nearly killed her had brought her there. And somehow that lonely ranch had become the only place left that felt honest. At first, Elena intended to stay only a few days. Cole cleared out the small room beside the wood stove because it stayed warmer during the night and required fewer steps across the creaking hallway. He replaced a broken lamp, tightened the loose floorboards, and patched the draft near the window without ever mentioning it aloud. Elena arrived with almost nothing. A few folded dresses, a wooden box filled with old photographs of Daniel, Ghost's worn saddle, and an old woven Redhawk family blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. Ghost was given a stall near the house. But during the first several nights, the horse refused to settle properly. He kept turning toward Elena's window as if making certain she was still there. Cole noticed everything without commenting on it. He repaired the porch steps so Elena would not slip on frost, started the stove earlier each morning so the kitchen would already be warm when she woke, added extra hay for Ghost before every snowfall. Neither of them called it home. Not yet. But slowly, small signs of Elena's presence appeared throughout the ranch house. A kettle waiting on the stove before sunrise. Folded towels placed neatly across chairs. The faint sound of prayer drifting through the kitchen before dawn. Mercer Ranch slowly stopped feeling like the hiding place of a man who wanted to disappear from the world. And for the first time in many years, Cole no longer dreaded hearing another person moving through the house at night. Weeks later, when the roads cleared enough to reach Black Hollow Lake safely, Cole drove Elena back to the old Red Hawk cabin. The place looked exhausted. Part of the roof had collapsed inward near the chimney. The porch sagged badly to one side. Window glass hung cracked and cloudy inside warped wooden frames. Tall grass swallowed the path leading toward the lake, and the old horse fence leaned half-broken beneath years of Wyoming wind. Elena stood silently in front of the cabin for a very long time, without stepping closer. "This was home," she whispered eventually. "Before Daniel moved into town, before debt, before fear." Cole didn't ask whether she wanted to keep the place. The next morning, he simply returned carrying lumber tools and a box of nails. He repaired the porch first, then the roof, then the broken fencing near the old stable where Ghost used to sleep years earlier. He cleared the overgrown trail leading down toward the lake and rebuilt the cabin shutters overlooking Black Hollow water. He never announced what he was doing. He simply kept showing up. After a few days, Hank Morrison arrived with extra timber in the back of his truck. "I had leftovers," he muttered gruffly. Cole nodded without arguing. Soon afterward, 2 neighboring ranchers appeared carrying fence posts and coffee. Rachel Boone visited one afternoon to discuss paperwork tied to the investigation, then quietly picked up a hammer and helped repair the rear wall for nearly an hour before leaving. Nobody gave speeches. Nobody talked about redemption. The cabin slowly came back to life through the hands of people who had finally decided to stop looking away. Claire Whitmore remained in Pine Creek for several more weeks under investigation. She handed over emails from Victor Hale debt records, threatening text messages, and documentation tied to secret meetings with town officials. Her testimony helped Rachel connect Daniel's death to the wider network of land coercion spreading around Black Hollow. But forgiveness never came easily. When Claire finally visited Elena one last time before leaving Wyoming, and the meeting lasted less than 10 minutes. Claire stood on the Mercer Ranch porch looking smaller than Cole remembered. No elegant clothes, no polished composure, just exhaustion. "I loved him," Claire whispered through tears. Elena looked at her quietly. "I know." Claire's voice shook harder. "I never thought it would become this." Elena did not embrace her, did not tell her everything would heal. She simply said, "You must live with the truth you helped bury." Claire nodded once, unable to speak further. Then she left Wyoming, silently disappearing down the long highway out of Pine Creek, without anyone waiting to say goodbye. And with her departure, the darkest part of Daniel's old life finally seemed to close behind them. As summer approached, something unexpected began happening across Pine Creek. People stopped staying silent. An elderly widow arrived at Mercer Ranch, carrying a land purchase letter that had kept her awake for months. A retired rancher admitted he had been threatened with tax audits if he refused to sell. Another native family discovered irregular signatures hidden inside their land paperwork. Martha Crowley, the sharp-tongued widow who lived near the north edge of the lake, began organizing names and property records from families targeted by Victor's network. Conversations at the diner, church garage, and grocery store slowly turned into something larger. Not anger alone. Solidarity. For the first time, Pine Creek understood Daniel Red Hawk's death had never been an isolated tragedy. The entire town had been shaped by fear, silence, and shame. Cole hated becoming the center of attention. But people trusted him precisely because he did not want power. And Elena became something even more important. She became proof that dignity could survive betrayal. By autumn, Rachel Boone, Elena Cole, and several volunteer attorneys officially created the Red Hawk Land Trust. The organization existed to help elderly landowners, native families, and struggling residents defend themselves against predatory land deals and legal manipulation. Rachel connected the trust with state legal resources and investigation records. Martha Crowley organized support lists and emergency assistance requests. Hank Morrison secretly donated money to repair the trust office roof, then angrily denied doing it when anyone thanked him. Elena insisted on one thing immediately. The trust would not be named directly after Daniel. Daniel didn't die to become a photograph hanging on a wall, she said quietly during one meeting. He died trying to protect this land. So the name Red Hawk Land Trust remained. Not a memorial, a continuation. Years passed slowly across Black Hollow. The lawsuits surrounding Victor Hale dragged on through state courts until the entire Black Hollow Resort project was permanently destroyed. Fraudulent land transactions were reviewed and overturned where possible. Several stolen properties were returned to their rightful owners or placed under legal conservation protection. Most importantly, Red Hawk Ridge entered permanent preservation status. No corporation would ever build resorts there. No developers would carve roads across its hillsides. The proposed highway into Black Hollow vanished from future state planning maps entirely. The lake remained untouched. The pine trees still leaned over the shoreline, exactly as they had for generations. Wind still moved through the tall Wyoming grass in long silver waves. The old cabin remained standing near the water, and the narrow trail Daniel once rode with Ghost remained visible beside the ridge. One evening, Elena stood overlooking the lake while the sun disappeared behind the mountains. "The land doesn't always need victory," she said softly. "Sometimes it only needs to be left alone." Time touched Ghost, too. The horse's white-gray coat grew thinner and paler with age. His movements slowed. Winters became harder on his joints. But something else changed as well. During those first nights at Mercer Ranch, Ghost never truly rested. He stayed alert, constantly watching Elena's window like a creature guarding unfinished grief. After the truth about Daniel finally came into the open, that tension slowly disappeared. Ghost began sleeping deeply inside the stable. And once the cabin near the lake was fully repaired, the old horse spent most afternoons lying peacefully beneath the porch roof, while sunlight warmed his aging body. Elena often sat beside him, brushing his mane with Daniel's old comb. One evening, she smiled faintly while watching Ghost sleep. "He knows Daniel finally came home," she whispered. Maybe the horse could not understand every word, but something inside him no longer seemed trapped in fear, and the peace Ghost carried became proof the house itself had healed. Cole gradually spent more time at the cabin than at Mercer Ranch. He repaired fences, chopped wood, cared for Ghost, and walked Elena slowly along the lakeshore during quiet evenings. Elena cooked for both of them, corrected the terrible way Cole made coffee, and forced him to eat meals at proper hours instead of surviving on canned beans and whiskey. They never called each other family. They did not need to. Elena left small notes around the cabin, reminding Cole to buy salt in town, replace the bandage on his hand, or stop climbing onto the roof during high winds. And one day, without realizing it, Cole casually said, "I'll head home before dark." The word stopped him immediately after he spoke it. Home. For a man who had spent years living like a stranger inside his own life, that single word meant more than he could explain. Elena understood it too. Cole never replaced Daniel, but he became the man who stayed after Daniel no longer could. Many years later, Pine Creek had changed quietly but permanently. The Red Hawk Land Trust became the first place elderly residents and native families visited before signing any land agreement. Cole's hair turned silver. Elena's hands became thinner and weaker with age. Ghost became known across the entire region as the old white-gray horse from Black Hollow. He no longer ran like he once had, but every time Elena stepped onto the porch, Ghost still struggled to his feet to greet her. One spring evening, Cole carried a carved wooden sign toward the front gate of the cabin. He mounted it carefully beside the trail. Elena stood silently nearby while the last light of day settled across the hills. The sign read, Red Hawk Ridge. Elena stared at it for a very long time before finally nodding once. The land had kept its name, and that mattered. The final years passed gently beside Black Hollow Lake. Golden sunsets reflected across calm water. Wind rolled endlessly through Wyoming grasslands like waves across an ocean. Smoke rose from the cabin chimney beneath cold evening skies. Ghost rested beside the porch with his white muzzle silvered by age eyes, half closed in the fading sunlight. Elena sat near the doorway with the old woven Red Hawk blanket across her lap. Cole leaned against the fence overlooking the lake, and there at last, he understood something he had spent most of his life running from. Family was not always where a person was born. Sometimes family was simply the place that still left the door open after the rest of the world had turned away. Family was the one who stayed beside you through blizzards, truth grief, and all the long, silent years afterward. As evening settled over Black Hollow for the final time, Ghost slowly closed his eyes beside the porch in complete peace. Red Hawk Ridge was no longer land people hunted. It had finally become home. For me, this story is not only about justice or survival. It's about how one small act of kindness can completely change the direction of a person's life. Cole stopped that night, thinking he was only helping a freezing woman in a storm. But in reality, he was saving himself from years of loneliness, guilt, and emotional isolation. Sometimes the people we rescue end up rescuing us too. And I think that's the most beautiful message this story leaves behind. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this story. Your support, comments, and kindness truly mean the world to this channel. If this journey touched your heart, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next unforgettable story.